Hi, Dr. C, and to anyone else that's watching this video, welcome and thank you for joining me in my Leadership 5 reflection on Module 10 and the takeaways that I had from that. As seen in my last few videos, I usually begin with the kind of overarching themes and main ideas that stuck out to me. And this week it was how establishing a common purpose and the different facets of effectively doing so, whether by means of contributing to the acceptance of everyone's visions, aims, and values are most appropriately met. So I was kind of curious and excited to learn more about how does a common purpose play a role in effective group work, which is entirely relevant to this past semester and the group work that we do in this class. So I guess I would say the first emotion that I felt while analyzing this content was feeling very surprised, and that was in regards to the Harvard article that was shared. And it said that what successful movements have in common is that there is strength in the mobilization of small groups rather than large crowds. And for a moment I thought, well, every successful movement that I can think of is successful because of its mass mobilization and the amount of people that support the common goal. However, I learned in this article that the mass mobilization of these groups are actually an effect of proper and efficient goals. They're not a cause, it's an effect. So, sharing the most equal distribution of ideas amongst small groups and solidifying those has the capacity to gain traction. So once you have those ideas, those goals, and you're on the same page as everyone, the people will follow. That was one of my favorite parts of that article, was saying, the people will follow. The mass mobilization, that will be an afterthought. A strong truth in confirming idea that came to mind was how inspiration is key to any sort of movement, group work, or election, political platform. And it got me thinking, why do we care about employee satisfaction? This is in regards to the discussion post that I had with one of my peers. He asked, is it more important to perpetuate and place value in employee satisfaction or organization satisfaction, their aims, their goals? And my response to that was, when companies are looking to hire employees and when they're looking to see who would best fit the role for anything, one of the first things they're going to look at is, how does this person's vision, how do their ideas, how do their values relate to my organization's value as a whole? And then the part of the lecture where Dr. C discussed communicating those values, kind of what he called establishing buy-in, it's so important because it can be done in so many different ways, which is something that I had not ever thought about before. Previously, if you had asked me, what does establishing buy-in look like to you? I probably would have answered something like having the same ideas or making sure your goals are the same. Everything that's goal-oriented and task-oriented, as opposed to sharing stories, sharing perspectives, recognizing each other's backgrounds, races, as ethnicities. And I think it's so easy to forget that the things that make us who we are, where we come from, where we've gone to school, our levels of education, those are intrinsic to inspiration of the goals that we're trying to achieve. The past experiences that you've had, that could be a huge reason why you are part of a small group or believe in the idea of a organization as a whole. Furthermore, a very impactful surprise, as I mentioned before, was that mass mobilization is an effect of success, not a cause. And the argument in the Harvard article that said, rhetoric rarely persuades, that was very surprising to me, and I'd actually like to challenge that because I think that specifically analyzing the political climate and contextualization of our administration, the rhetoric of Donald Trump is something that mobilized and brought together a lot of people who were fed up with the system, a lot of people that believed in his idea and his message. And I'd like to share an example from this book that I'm reading called Political Tribes by Amy Chua. I really recommend it. And I was able to connect the argument that rhetoric rarely persuades and why Donald Trump was so popular by so much surprise is actually because of the WWE, and we can connect Trump's popularity with WWE. And the connection is that when you think about WWE, you think about something that a lot of people detest. It's raunchy, it's hardcore, it's staged, and a lot of people kind of reject those disingenuous acts of sports. It's tacky, it's out there. But something that I fail to recognize is that even though it puts on such a show, WWE has one of the largest fan bases in the country. And many of those constituents being working class whites. With this, I made that connection in that, Donald Trump, for many people, he's detestable, he's tacky, he is disingenuous with his actions, and everything is very planned out and organized, very theatrical. Yet his fan base amongst white working voters was huge. One of the reasons why he won the election. So the mass mobilization of success in regards to rhetoric that one employs, whether that's through the WWE or Donald Trump, is actually something that I think is an integral aspect of kind of finding and delineating the common purpose, which makes a political candidate or a group project or a company's goal so successful. That being said, I feel curious about looking at the analysis of anti-institution rhetoric and the effect that has on radical activists, and how radical rhetoric has the ability to mobilize groups. I think that it's sometimes the very out there ideas which cause people to want to join something. As mentioned in the lecture, we discussed how you have to have a commitment to applying new facets and new ways of leadership. When you become part of a group, the commitment to doing things differently and the promise of sticking to that and attempting to do it is what's important to the group vision as a whole, what's leading for inspiration. The inspiration is key. And I don't think that you can have a movement or have an idea that's inspiring to others if it isn't out there, if it isn't something different, if it isn't guided by a new way of looking at things differently. So I thought that was a very impactful and confirming idea that I learned through the lecture. Furthermore, in the textbook, the graph which compared being humble, hungry, and smart was very interesting for me. I thought it was kind of cool when Dr. C in the textbook elaborated a little bit more on the combination of being hungry and being smart. And in that sense, you're more of a politician. And I think that in any sort of group setting, there's always going to be politics. The most difficult part of working with a group is working with people. It's not the administrative tasks, it's not the scheduling, it's working with people and getting on the same page as them. It's establishing that common purpose, and I feel like the focus on what it means to have a common purpose this week has led me to come full circle in understanding what it means to be an effective leader, especially in the context of a group. Furthermore, in terms of leadership, I think that graph which discussed hungry, smart, humble, the danger of being humble is, as Dr. C mentioned, you have good intergroup relations with the rest of the group, but you're not contributing anything effective. So it kind of got me curious on what's the most healthy relationship of being humble. I think that, when you're a success or when you've achieved something noteworthy, your accolades usually speak for you. But I think that to be an effective leader, you have to be confident in yourself. You have to be able to convince others of your vision and your aims and your goals. And with that comes being a little bit cocky. And that's a challenge that I think a lot of relationship-oriented leaders face, is being cocky and affirming that my ideas have the capacity to cause great change. And it's definitely a challenge. So throughout this module, another thing that I've kind of discovered about myself is, you can't have a vision if you aren't willing to try something new. And trying things new, it can be scary. Figuring out what the buy-in is for the group can be tough. The buy-in is sometimes sharing perspectives, as Dr. C said, telling stories, discussing the significance of your backgrounds and your past experiences. And it's addressing kind of the differences that allow us to come together to consolidate and solidify the vision we have. In conclusion, I'd also like to touch upon Patrick Leoncioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. I think that also sort of relates to what I've discovered about myself and, the emotions I felt through reading this content. And within the 5 dysfunctions of a team, I actually would like to argue, and I did in my discussion post, that the fear of conflict is the most damaging dysfunction of them all. I think that the fear of conflict has, the chance to inhibit communication. It will stop any ability for sharing ideas at the same playing field. As I remember learning about in the Amazon article from last week about effective groups, it was Group B, the group that focused more heavily on everyone kind of sharing their ideas equally instead of one person dominating the time as they did in Group A. And this, challenged my prior perspective to the success of a group. Typically, I thought of it as, one leader, followers, and everyone sort of adheres to what the leader believes in because of who they are, how they act, and what their vision is. But the fear of conflict within your followers and within yourself, I think, is so dangerous to a cohesive group because you'll never know what your followers are thinking. You'll always be too nervous to share conflicting ideas, and it's something that has a very, very dangerous potential to limit the cohesiveness and communication of a group, communication being the most important thing you can have in a group. And then so I asked myself, how can I use what I learned from this week to help me in the future? The first thought that came to mind was with the social change project that I'm working on with my group. I think it's definitely a challenge that we are living in a digital Zoom age. But, the ideas of sharing our visions without having to feel challenged and doing so in a way where we kind of open the conversation to share our experiences, our backgrounds, maybe funny stories that establish those connections, make me feel more confident in my group's ability to effectively communicate and produce a successful and quality maintaining product. And that sort of just kind of made me feel more excited and more confident within myself to take a step back when I need to or take a step up whenever it seems necessary. So that being said, thank you for watching and have a great week.